a ground beef, or better yet, picadillo and mashed potato casserole. A great idea for any night of the week, to feed a crowd, to take over to a friend's house, for whenever. It is super yummy and easy to put together. Sally, that girl, in the kitchen. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sally, that girl, in the kitchen. In today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to make a ground beef and mashed potato casserole. Super delicious and a great meal to feed a crowd. So I've actually made these really large when we have a special occasion or a group dinner where we're each supposed to bring a dish. This is a really great dish to prepare that can feed a lot of people, and it's very hearty and it's just warm and delicious. So you may be thinking this is similar to a shepherd's pie, but I don't like to call it that because of course I cook with some Latin flavors, and of course my mashed potato is going to be non-dairy but still absolutely delicious. And so this is my own little version, so I prefer to call it a ground beef and mashed potato casserole. So whatever you want to call it, it's delicious, and I am super excited to teach you how to make it. So let's not wait another second and let's get started. For the ground beef part of today's recipe, you will need 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, 4 cloves of garlic, 2 pounds of lean ground beef, 5 tablespoons of tomato paste, which is about 3 ounces, 2 packets of Sazon accent, 1 tablespoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 2 tablespoons of dehydrated minced onions, which of course you can replace for fresh onions if you prefer, just chop those up, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of dried oregano, a half a teaspoon of salt, a quarter teaspoon of ground black pepper, 3 teaspoons of turbinado sugar, also known as sugar in the raw, but if you don't have that, you can use whatever your preferred sugar is, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar, a splash of white wine, and a drizzle of the brine from some manzanilla Spanish olives. And for the mashed potato part of today's recipe, you will need 5 medium-sized Yukon Gold potatoes, 2 teaspoons of salt that you're going to add to the water when boiling the potatoes, plus 1 1/4 teaspoon of salt for seasoning the mashed potato, a half a teaspoon of ground white pepper. You can of course use black pepper instead, but I like to keep this nice and beautiful and yellow, and I don't want those little black specks running throughout, but you can use whichever you prefer. 8 tablespoons, which is 1 stick, of a non-dairy margarine, and a 1/4 cup of non-dairy creamer. Of course, if you have no concern with mixing dairy and meat, then you can use butter and cream instead. You will also need a 9 by 13 inch baking dish, a wet measuring cup, a medium-sized pot with a lid, a colander and a medium-sized bowl, a couple of serving spoons and a fork, some measuring spoons, a garlic masher, or of course you can use a knife instead, a wooden spoon or your preferred spatula for cooking, some oven mitts, a potato masher, and I'm going to be using this cool tool. It actually was a gift from my mom. It's a meat grinder. It actually helps to break up the meat, and I'm going to add one to my Amazon store, my Sally That Girl in the Kitchen Amazon store, in case you'd like to pick one of those up. And finally, you will need a medium-sized skillet with a lid. So now that we have all of our ingredients and tools together, let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is wash 5 Yukon Gold potatoes, some beautiful medium-sized potatoes, and add them to your medium-sized pot with cool water, and add to that 2 teaspoons of salt. I'm not peeling them now, I'm going to peel them once they're cooked. So then I turn my stove onto medium heat just to get that boiling started. Then I'm moving over to my medium-sized skillet, and to it I'm adding 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. Then I'm turning my stove on to low heat. Then I'm going to add 4 garlic cloves that I have pressed, but of course, as I said, you can chop them instead. And my hands are nice and clean, I just washed them. So I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure I get all that garlic in there. And then I'm gonna move that garlic around. I wanna make sure it gets nicely infused by that beautiful extra virgin olive oil, just completely coated in that beautiful oil. And then I'm just gonna cook it for a minute or 2. Just keep an eye on it and make sure not to burn your garlic. So once it's fragrant, then all you're gonna do is right on top of that beautiful garlic, which is already smelling incredible, I'm going to go ahead and add my ground beef. I'm using lean ground beef for this. You can, of course, use ground turkey or ground chicken or even ground lamb or a combination of whatever your favorite meats are. But I like to go classic with some lean ground beef. And then I'm using this handy tool. As I said, this was a gift from my mom, and it really is super handy. You just go in there right on top of your ground beef and then just kind of give it a little twirl, and it breaks up the ground beef so perfectly. I absolutely love it. I don't know what I used to do before I had this tool. I guess I would just continue to break it up with a wooden spoon, but this is just fantastic. So now I've broken up my ground beef and I'm gonna start seasoning. So I'm gonna start with a 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of onion powder, then a teaspoon of garlic powder. Then I'm coming in with a teaspoon of dried oregano. I actually usually use a couple of bay leaves, but since I'm going to be baking this, I don't want to worry about removing them. I like to go with oregano instead. And then I add a teaspoon of cumin, and then a teaspoon of paprika. This is just regular sweet paprika. Then I'm coming in with 2 tablespoons of dehydrated minced onions. As I said earlier, you can replace this for 1 small yellow onion, and you would probably want to cook that up when you cooked up the garlic. But my kids love it this way. This is the way I always make it, and it just works. It's got really good flavor. And then I'm going to be using this Sazon accent, which is my favorite little packet of Sazon. I'm actually using 2 little packets for 2 pounds of ground beef. Then I'm going to add 3 teaspoons of turbinado sugar. This is sugar in the raw. You can use whatever your favorite sugar is, but I just love this. It's just got a perfect flavor, and it complements the acidic ingredients that we're going to be adding. So I'll also mention, if you've watched my picadillo recipe, I normally add raisins to my picadillo, but for this version, my kids have always preferred it without the raisins, so I add the sugar to give it that sweetness and skip the raisins, but of course you could very well add some raisins too. And of course, the tomato paste also is nicely balanced out by the sugar. So I'm using 1/2 a can because this is a 6-ounce can, and what I want is 5 tablespoons or 3 ounces. For that acidity or that tang, I'm coming in with 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I just use the bottled stuff, but you can squeeze your own if you'd like. And I'm also adding 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar, which gives it sweetness and acidity all in one. Super delicious. And then I'm going to use a little bit of this brine. I normally would add olives when making picadillo, but in this version, in my baked version, I just use a little bit of the brine for that flavor, but of course you could add in the olives. And then lastly, you're just gonna wanna add a splash of white wine. I always keep a bottle of wine in the fridge that I use for cooking, but I don't use cooking wine. I definitely always use a drinking wine. So any bottle that you may have opened, or if not, just keep a bottle in your fridge for cooking. It really makes a difference when you're using drinking wine as opposed to cooking wine. And then I'm coming in with this wooden spoon with like a straight edge. It just really helps mix everything together. But if I have to cut up any little chunk that has formed, anything that's just clumping together, I'd like to use this like wooden spoon with a straight edge, because that way I can just break up any little piece that tends to cling together. And then all I'm doing is mixing together all of the ingredients. Obviously, the order of the ingredients that we added outside of the olive oil and garlic, which of course we cooked first to just infuse that beautiful oil and that beautiful garlic, just marry those two flavors together and really bring out that garlic flavor. The rest of the ingredients, the order doesn't really matter. We're just gonna add in all those dry ingredients. We're gonna add in those beautiful liquids, the tomato paste, and then just bring it all together. And this is gonna be fragrant and delicious. And of course, that Cuban sazon just gives it a little extra something, and that cumin just has that warmth. It's just absolutely delicious. So then I've mixed it all together. I'm gonna put on a lid. And so if your lid doesn't have a vent like this one, then you just wanna vent it by tipping it just a little bit, and then you're just gonna leave it covered and let it cook. So while we were putting the meat together, the potatoes have come to a boil. So at this point, I'm gonna cover them. I'm also gonna vent them just a touch, and I'm gonna lower my heat to low. And the potatoes will take about 40 minutes or so to soften, and the meat is only gonna take about 15 minutes to cook. So that's why we start with the potatoes, because those take a little bit longer. Now is also a good time to preheat your oven to 350. Make sure you have a rack in the center. And then look at how beautiful our meat is looking. As I said, it's maybe 15 minutes total cooking time. And look at how absolutely beautiful. All I'm doing is coming in one more time, giving it all a little stir, making sure that tomato paste gets fully incorporated, and of course just breaking down any other little pieces, little clumps that have formed. And it is smelling incredible. I mean, you can imagine with the spices that we've added and those beautiful acidic flavors, that touch of sugar, it just comes together and it is so delicious. You could serve this just as is with some rice or some quinoa or whatever your preferred side is, and it would be divine. But imagine how yummy it's gonna be when we put it together with those beautiful potatoes that we're preparing. So now this is looking great, smelling great. It's almost ready. All I did was come in, give it another little stir, break it up, just show it a little more love. I'm gonna cover it 2 more minutes and it's good to go. And then once those 2 minutes have passed, I'm gonna turn off my stove. As I said, it took about 15 minutes to cook this. Super yummy, super delicious. I'm gonna take it off the heat and just work on my potatoes. So now, my potatoes have been boiling. It's been about 40 minutes at this point, and now they're beautiful, they're fork tender. It's going to depend on the size of your potatoes, of course, how long it takes. Mine took about 40 minutes on low, and I'm just gonna turn off my heat at this point, and then I'm gonna carefully bring my potatoes over to my sink, and I'm just gonna drain the water out into my colander. Yes, I'm also gonna have a facial at the same time because of course this beautiful steam is being released, so be very careful. And then once they cool enough, we just wanna leave it for a few minutes because of course you're gonna use your hands or a fork and just gently remove that skin. It's gonna come off real easy. Then we're gonna add our potatoes into a medium bowl. Then I'm bringing over my stick of non-dairy margarine and I added it in. Then I'm adding in a half a teaspoon of ground white pepper. And then I'm gonna add 1 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then I'm just going to add a 1/4 cup of the non-dairy creamer. Now, by using the non-dairy butter and the non-dairy creamer, then of course we keep this mashed potato non-dairy. But as I said in the beginning of this video, if you are someone that is not concerned by the mix of dairy and meat, then you can use butter and you can use cream. But I'm telling you, you're not gonna miss the butter and cream in this mashed potato, because look at how absolutely beautiful and creamy it is. And we're not using any dairy at all. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And that Yukon Gold potato has such a beautiful color. It's absolutely perfect. So I'm just gonna come in and I'm gonna taste the mashed potato at this point for salt. Yep, it's perfect. It needs nothing else. So now I brought over my 9x13 baking dish, and I'm going to add my ground beef first. I don't even need to spray the pan because this is lean ground beef, but it does have a little bit of fat, of course, and that olive oil that we used in the beginning is perfect. It doesn't need to be sprayed. And then we're gonna come over and we're going to add our beautiful golden mashed potatoes. And what I'm doing is I'm just gently adding them on top and just making sure that I'm covering every area because I don't want that meat exposed. I'm going to make a blanket of potatoes right on top of the meat. So I'm just distributing it. And then what I do is I use the back of my spoon and I gently spread those potatoes out. I don't have to press down too hard. All I need to do is just very gently make a beautiful layer of that creamy, smooth mashed potato. And then once I've spread it out, it's looking absolutely perfect. But of course, I want to do one more step, because if we fluff it up just a little bit with a fork, the way I'm doing here, then when we bake this, it's just going to get these golden little bits on top, these just crispy, beautiful golden bits. Now, this is of course 100% optional, but I love it. So I highly recommend it. And then when you do this, you're gonna see the results at the end. It's just gonna be perfectly beautiful with that crispy little top at the end. So then I'm gonna pop it on a center rack in my oven. I'm gonna set a 20-minute timer. And then after 20 minutes, I'm not gonna pull it out. I'm gonna set my oven to broil, and I'm gonna put it in for about 3 minutes, but keep an eye on it, because what we wanna do is get that beautiful golden crispiness on top. Look at how pretty. I told you that if you fluffed it up with a fork, you'd have a really pretty top. It just looks really nice. The presentation looks gorgeous and inviting. And look at that beautiful golden mashed potato. And you can see that underneath there's a surprise hidden, because you can kind of see around the edges the way it's become a little more golden from that yummy meat that is hidden underneath. And this is, as I said, a perfect dish for any night, or even to take to someone's house. It's perfect because it is filling and just so delicious. Make a little bit of a side salad and you've got a meal. It's absolutely gorgeous. And look at how amazing it looks with that beautiful layer of picadillo, of ground beef underneath. So tasty. And that golden, gorgeous top. Really? They say we eat with our eyes first, and it's true. It's beautiful. It's inviting. It smells incredible. My mouth is literally watering as I admire it. It's got that beautiful golden edge. Just absolutely gorgeous. Okay, I always do this when I film. If you've watched my videos before, I take way too much time admiring the beautifulness of the results of what I have just created, but that's part of the beauty of cooking. So now, enough with the admiring, it's time to taste this. Look how delicate it is. It just breaks up so easily. It's just perfectly fluffy, flavorful. I cannot wait to take a bite of this. My mouth is literally watering. It looks absolutely gorgeous and so appetizing. It's so perfectly flavorful, delicious. The combination of textures and flavors is perfect. That picadillo is absolutely delicious. So flavorful. those Latin spices, that cumin comes through. So delicious. The perfect level of acidity, sweetness. It's just absolutely divine. And of course, those golden mashed potatoes on top, a little bit of crisp on top. It's just absolutely perfect. So yummy, so flavorful. That crispy golden edge. All of it is divine. I know you're gonna love this. So good. So how crazy good does this ground beef and mashed potato casserole look? I mean, it is so tasty. It's warm, it's hearty, it's inviting, and it's really a complete meal. Of course, you can serve it with a vegetable side. Ooh, I'm thinking a side of my Sephardic style green beans, which I adore, or with some salad, or just any roasted vegetables on the side, and you have a complete meal. It's absolutely delicious, filling, easy to make, and super yummy. Trust me. No, better yet, don't trust me. You're gonna have to try to make this recipe yourself. And of course, if you've enjoyed today's recipe, don't forget to like it, to write me a sweet comment, to share it with your friends. Thank you so much for taking my link and sharing it and passing it along. It really helps my channel grow. So thank you so much for doing that. And of course, if you've enjoyed today's recipe, don't forget to follow me on social media. You can find me as Sally That Girl in the Kitchen on Facebook, Instagram, and on Pinterest. And you can also find me as Sally That Girl FL on Twitter, Snapchat, and on TikTok. And of course, if you're not already subscribed right here on YouTube, stop what you're doing right now. Go over, subscribe, touch that little notification bell, and you're gonna get notified every time I put up a new recipe video, which I'm doing all of the time. And of course, there's so many recipe videos already there. There are things from all over the world that I know you're gonna love. So make sure to check those all out. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Sally That Girl in the Kitchen.